So Mike has been as a founding member of this organization. Mike has been around since day one, and I know that he is very passionate and works very, very hard doing immigration law and in New York City. So I know that it's very, very important, more important now than ever. So I have very high regard for that. I don't think there's enough Michaels nowadays. And Michael's going to speak about immigration, but not historically like Stu just did. Michael's going to speak about our current day issues. So, Mike, thanks for being our speaker, and call is yours.
Thanks. Thanks, Shaf. I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I wish I had like a positive spin on this. You know, Stu started off great. The history of this country is so rich, and with the exception of indigenous people, everyone has an immigration story. We all do, and I think a lot of people in the country have strayed from that truth. And there's a lot of fears of immigrants, and there's a lot of worries and backlash, and that fear and that worry and that backlash led to the reelection of Donald Trump. And one of his, I don't know if I don't want to call it prize winning. That's not the right word. Key points of his administration is mass deportations, and so he's building a machine, and his administration is building a huge machine. And I think when everyone's watching the news and reading the newspapers, you're seeing mostly the ICE raids. You're seeing ICE show up in neighborhoods. If you're not physically seeing ICE, you're seeing it on the news. You're seeing people get ripped off the streets. You're seeing raids at Home Depots and churches and hospitals and all different places. And I sort of wanted to cover the behind the scenes stuff, especially what's been happening over the last couple of months to help facilitate this process, right? If the administration followed the law, they wouldn't be able to do what they were doing right now. So we know they're breaking the law. And immigrants are entitled to due process. They're entitled to rights. We are bound to the Constitution. And the administration is not following it. So I just wanted to cover some of the changes, most importantly, the recent changes to USCIS policy, the Supreme Court's emergency shadow docket, authorizing indiscriminate ICE raids in LA, the BIA changes to eliminating bond hearings, which I'll go over, and then I'll touch on the current detention stats and just sort of projected trends that we can expect in the coming months. Next slide. So USCIS is the agency that traditionally has been exclusively focused on processing benefit applications. So if you're applying for a green card, a work visa, USCIS is the agency that's responsible for that. And in August alone, they issued 3 memos that fundamentally shifted how applications are reviewed. So I just wanted to touch on these changes. And you may have heard about some of this earlier in the year, but it was focused on student visas. So the Department of State was essentially targeting F1 student visas, international students coming to the United States to study, and screening for anti-American behavior and anti-Semitic activity, conduct, or content on social media. They've now moved that framework into the immigration benefit petition process. So it's unclear how they're actually going to be screening for this. A lot of what's been happening over the last 8 or 9 months is they put out these policies and they have no idea how to implement them. And so as immigration attorneys, we're sort of shuffling and communicating amongst ourselves and trying to figure out, like, how do we actually submit cases now, given these changes? And what essentially is happening now is they're going to start screening at some point for anti-American and anti-Semitic ideology and behavior. What does that mean? I don't actually know, to be completely honest with you. Anti-American, I guess that's criticizing America, criticizing American history, criticizing the administration, Donald Trump. And then, as we've seen, the using anti-Semitic as a phraseology when it comes to these things is really just a cover for criticizing the state of Israel. So individuals that are in support of the Palestinian people, that are criticizing the Israeli government, they're going to be screening for that. And the word on the street is that they're going to be using AI to do this. And as we know, AI is not it's not where it should be, and it's not where it's supposed to be. And so there's obviously going to be screenings that are going to probably find things or find or make up and have hallucinations. So that's going to be a huge concern. But ultimately, I think what this policy is meant to do is to give the officers more discretion to just deny applications. So one of the things that we anticipated coming into this administration was they're going to throw sand in the gears to completely slow the entire system down. And this is one way to do it, right? So if you go through someone's application and you say, yeah, we saw that you were walking, we saw a photo that you were in on your social media and you happen to be walking by a protest, that's anti-American. We're going to deny your application. So it's just, this is not the policy. This is not the policy of this country. We're now screening for ideology. This subverts the First Amendment. Obviously, the First Amendment applies to everyone in the United States, immigrants, American citizens alike, and it's just going to have a huge negative impact on benefit applications. So people seeking green cards, people trying to bring their family members here. So was not happy about this one, of course. Next slide. The other major shift is making considerable changes to the naturalization process. So they're essentially bringing back a policy that was ended in 1981. So there used to be something called neighborhood investigations, and the officers reviewing your application would show up in your neighborhood, knock on your neighbors' doors, and ask them questions about you. And they learned very quickly that this was incredibly time consuming. And certainly there were less people in the country in 1981 as compared to now. And so eventually they shut it down. The program ran for about 10 years. It ran from 1981 to 1991, and then they shut it down. Well, they're bringing that back. And obviously, again, this is to slow down the application process. If you're asking officers to go and investigate people in their neighborhoods, they're not going to have time to process every application. It's a huge waste of time. And so that memo that came out essentially says, we're going to be doing this, but if you don't want us to do it, you could volunteer the information yourself. So what we are as immigration attorneys considering doing is asking our clients to just get affidavits from neighbors, coworkers, employers, just sort of buttering them up, saying they're great people, saying that they are, contributing members to society. They deserve to be U.S. citizens. I'm not so concerned with that one. The more concerning one is the second policy that came out in August, which is a shift to a holistic review of applications. This is super frustrating. So there was the last major legislation related to immigration was in 1996. It was signed by President Bill Clinton. It was quite possibly the worst piece of legislation as it pertains to immigration. It's a very draconian. It placed so many restrictions on people's abilities to come here, to be able to reunite with their families, to petition for family members to stay in the United States. And what that law did is it made a shift in naturalization policy to really look for negative factors, right? They're looking for criminal convictions. They're looking for bad behavior, right? Like, do you owe child support and you're not paying it? Do you owe back taxes and you're not paying it? Well, in addition to doing that and placing greater scrutiny on negative factors, they now want you to show positive factors. So what does that mean? So they're going to be screening and looking for community involvement in volunteer activities, volunteer with church communities, how many years you've been in the United States, how many family members you have here. They want this to be they're calling it a holistic review. But again, what is this doing? This is going to slow down the process. It's going to make it more difficult for people to become US citizens. Now, I saw another article that came out recently that they're also considering adding an essay component to the naturalization exam, which is just going to cut out probably hundreds, if not thousands, of people from the process. And one of the things that they're doing now, which I think is the most frustrating, I've actually had clients pull back from filing as a result of this. But traditionally, if you owed back taxes, as long as you were in a payment plan with the IRS, they let you file for naturalization and you'd get approved. Well, now they want you to pay your back taxes in full before you file. So I have a client right now who owes over $10,000 in back taxes. He can't pay that now. So he's not going to file his naturalization case. And it works, right? It fundamentally works. It stops people from applying. And I think the biggest thing here is that most American citizens would not be able to meet the bar that is now set for naturalization applicants. Next slide. So if you've been following Trump deploy the National Guard to LA and they're doing these roving raids, and ICE is sort of in conjunction with the National Guard roaming the streets of California, roaming the streets of Los Angeles, and they are making indiscriminate stops. They're stopping people for looking Latino, for speaking Spanish, and they're showing up at places where traditionally undocumented people are waiting to get jobs, day laborers, right? Home Depot, places like that. Now, this was litigated in federal court. The administration used the shadow docket of the Supreme Court to bypass the traditional path, the merits docket, which usually takes months and months. And they got approval from the Supreme Court of the United States to make these indiscriminate stops and essentially engage in racial profiling. So this is terrible. I mean, this violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. And the Supreme Court is on board, of course, with the administration. I mean, I think the administration is batting like, I don't know at this point, 1,000 when it comes to the immigration policies that they're implementing. So this is bad. This is really bad, and this just happened only a couple of days ago. Next slide. This is a big one. So there was a memo that came out in July from ICE, and what ICE tried to do was reinterpret a statute that has been very clear since 1965, the Immigration and Nationality Act. There are two provisions when it comes to detaining immigrants. There's Section 235 and 236. 236 is mandatory detention if you have criminal convictions, if you're arrested for murder, I mean, very, very serious crimes, you must be held in detention during the entire pendency of your immigration case. Section 235 traditionally and historically has only applied to individuals that are arriving at the airport. So what that section says that ICE and CBP can detain you at the airport, right? And then they can make a decision and essentially expedite removal you and turn you around and send you back home. Well, ICE made a reinterpretation that actually applies to everyone in the United States, specifically undocumented immigrants. And the Board of Immigration Appeals has sided with ICE recently as of the 5th of September of this year. And now anyone that is picked up by ICE that is undocumented, that came into the country illegally, essentially they walked across the border, right? They did not come in through an airport, through a port of entry. They are now subject to mandatory detention. So that means that the private prison industry is going to start booming big time, right? And they were mega donors to the Trump campaign, and this is all intentional. So we're going to see a huge, huge influx in the detention population in this country, and it's just this is bad policy. This is bad in every shape and form. It essentially revokes the ability of immigration judges to decide whether someone's entitled to bond, to be able to get out of detention. And again, traditionally, if you don't have a criminal record, you got out on bond, right? There was a bond hearing. The immigration judge heard your side. They determined whether you were a flight risk, what ties you up to the United States. And if you were low risk, they granted you bond and you got out. That's no longer a thing. Now, it is being appealed to the Court of Appeals. So we will see how this turns out. But for now, while that case is pending, people will be undocumented individuals will be detained and held during the pendency of their case. And ultimately, this puts people in a position. Do I sit in jail for years, or do I just accept my deportation and leave the country? Which is not a great choice. Next slide. So I just want to cover some stats over the last month. There are a total of 60,000 detainees in ICE custody right now. 70% of those individuals do not have criminal records. So when you see, what do they call her? ICE Barbie, Kristi Noem, when she's on TV and she's saying that they're only going after people with criminal records, it's not true. It's statistically not true. So 70% of the individuals that are in ICE custody do not have criminal records. There were about 31,000 bookings in July alone, and there are about 183,000 individuals who are on an ATD program, which is basically you get an ankle monitor and you have to report into ICE on a monthly basis, but they've also been detaining those individuals as well. Next slide. So I'm a visual person and I love baseball, and I hate to put it in these terms, but Yankee Stadium holds 46,537 people. At standing room capacity, it's 52,000. So imagine Yankee Stadium being packed to the brim and 10,000 more people waiting outside to get in. Like, that's how many people are in jail right now. Immigration violations, it's an administrative violation. It's not a criminal violation. So you're essentially in jail along with people that are committing criminal offenses for essentially, the equivalent of a traffic ticket. So this is where we're at right now. And then I think the last slide covers just sort of like projections and yeah. So, what can we expect moving forward? An expansion of ideological monitoring. We're going to see a lot of a shift to reviewing people's social media accounts and judging people based on their personal activity and their ideologies and beliefs. We're going to see the expansions of raids. Obviously, Trump is announcing moving into Chicago next, and eventually I think he'll make his way into New York City. There's going to be an escalation in detention pressure. The private prison industry is going to start booming if they're not already, and we're going to see the detainee population balloon to an astronomical level. We're going to see the shift from USCIS from being a benefit-based agency to being an enforcement-based agency. As of about 2 weeks ago, they've deputized USCIS. Officers are now authorized to carry guns, and they will have the same authority as ICE. So they can effectively detain you at your interview for a green card or naturalization and put you in ICE custody. This is directly aligned with Project 2025. Essentially, the goal in Project 2025 is to essentially dismantle the Department of Homeland Security, move a lot of the other components like FEMA, US Coast Guard, TSA into other agencies, and then turn immigration solely into an enforcement arm that just keeps people out. And this is directly in line with that. Number 5, look, we're still getting pushback. The courts are still working right now in the meantime. So we're going to see continuous challenges in the courts. And lastly, Project 2025 has permeated this entire administration's policies, especially immigration. So, with that, it's not joyful to share this information, but I think it's important to understand, sort of where they're headed, what the focus is. And like I myself as an immigration attorney have to constantly reconcile with like, is this just going to go away in a year? And sort of shift my practice into something else. I'm going to fight till the end. But it's just a very scary environment for immigrants in general and for all of us, frankly. But it's quite dire right now. Thank you.